You ever find yourself just struggling? Struggling with focus, or your organization is a mess, or you just feel constantly totally overwhelmed. And you start to wonder, could this be ADHD? It's a question so many adults are asking themselves these days, especially when it feels like these problems just came out of nowhere. So let's just get right to it. Let's tackle that big question head on. Can you actually develop ADHD when you're already an adult? Or is it possible you had it your whole life and just somehow missed all the signs?
Well, when it comes to our brains and our health, it's rarely a simple yes or no, is it? The real answer is a little more of a puzzle, but it's a really fascinating one to piece together. So, okay, let's dive in. To really solve this puzzle, we have to go back to the beginning. And when we're talking about ADHD, the beginning is always in childhood.
And we don't have to guess about this. The National Institute of Mental Health is super clear on it. They say that ADHD is a condition that begins in childhood. It's not something that can just suddenly pop up when you're 30 or 40 or 50. So here's the big takeaway from that. Getting diagnosed with ADHD as an adult isn't about getting a new condition. It's about finally discovering one that's been there all along. You likely had it as a kid, but for all sorts of reasons, it just went completely under the radar. And that, right there, leads to the next big question. If it starts in childhood, why on earth are so many people only getting diagnosed now, as adults? Why is this thing so hard to spot? Well, one of the biggest reasons is that there's no easy test for it. You can't just go get a blood test or an MRI and have it say, yep, you've got it. Diagnosing ADHD is much more like being a detective, You have to look for a pattern of clues that have been there your entire life. And this detective work is tricky for a few really important reasons. First off, ADHD just looks different on everybody. Also, as adults, we get really good at creating these elaborate coping mechanisms that can totally hide the symptoms. You might be an obsessive planner or even a workaholic just to create some kind of external structure for yourself. And here's a big one. The way hyperactivity looks in a 7-year-old bouncing off the walls is completely different from how it feels for a 37-year-old. For adults, it's often this intense internal restlessness, like your brain just won't shut off. You can see how all of this would be almost impossible for a doctor to spot in one short office visit. So what are these clues? What are the things that might be hiding right there in plain sight? Let's take a look at what the symptoms actually look like in adulthood. Generally, the symptoms fall into 3 main buckets. First, you've got inattention. This can look like making what people call careless mistakes, or really struggling to get through long, boring tasks, or just a general sense of disorganization. Then, there's hyperactivity. Again, not usually jumping on the furniture as an adult, but maybe talking a whole lot. And finally, there's impulsivity, that classic trouble waiting your turn, whether you're in a line or just in a conversation. And a lot of the time, these signs are things that we just write off as personality quirks. That desk that's always a complete disaster zone, the fact that you just cannot stick to a consistent morning routine no matter how hard you try, these can feel small, but they can be really significant clues that there's something bigger going on. So why does it feel like everything suddenly falls apart when you become an adult? This right here is the key. You might have been managing your symptoms your whole life, completely unconsciously. But then, life gets more complicated. You get a high-pressure job, you have kids, you have more responsibilities, and all of a sudden, those coping strategies that always worked before just aren't cutting it anymore. The scaffolding comes down, and the underlying ADHD is finally unmasked. Okay, so understanding the what and the why is hugely empowering. But what's even more important is knowing that if any of this is sounding familiar, there is absolutely a clear path forward. Treatment is usually a combination of things. For a lot of people, medication can be a total game changer, helping with focus and impulsivity. Psychotherapy is also incredibly powerful, especially something called cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT. It's all about helping you build practical, real-world skills to manage your life. And of course, there are other complementary approaches that can really help improve your overall quality of life. So let's just end with this thought. For probably a long time, you might have seen all these struggles as some kind of personal failing or a weakness in your character. But what if they're not? What if all this chaos with time management and focus and feeling overwhelmed, what if it's actually a signpost? One that's pointing you toward a much deeper understanding of how your unique brain works and ultimately toward a much better path forward.